Morning. Today we want to look at what I've called God's call. God's call. And our lead scripture is taken from Exodus chapter 3 at verse 4. Exodus chapter 3 at verse 4. I read, "And when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called unto him out of the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And Moses replied, Here I am." Now, God is always looking for those whom he will send. Um, the Bible tells us in Matthew 22 at verse 14 that many are called, but only few are chosen. So let's ask ourselves a question today. Are we ready? Being ready for God's call has to do with preparation. It has to do with a specific call of God on the individual. It has to do with the person being able to identify the unmistakable call of God upon his or her life. We'll take a few examples. We've seen Exodus 3 verse 4, how Moses was called. And remember, before Moses was called, he had been prepared. He had spent 40 years in the house of Pharaoh. And he spent another 40 years in the house of Jethro, his father-in-law. In other words, total sum of 80 years before he was ready and prepared. And even at that, God had to do something pretty dramatic to catch his attention. There was a bush that was burning, and he turned aside to look at the bush and realized that this bush is burning, but it's not being consumed. He was curious. It was only after then that when God saw that Moses had turned aside, that was when he called out. He said, Moses, Moses. And instantly, Moses recognized the voice of his maker and said, Here I am. Are you once again prepared? Can you identify the unmistakable voice of God amongst the cacophony of the world? Let's take a second example. Let's look at Elisha. In 1 Kings 14 at verse 19, Elijah was walking along and he saw this person plowing with his oxen. And Elijah didn't even say a word to Elisha. All he did was threw his mantle upon the person who was plowing his oxen. And that was the call. Instantly, Elisha identified that this is beyond the ordinary. He said he took all his oxen, killed, and that was it. In other words, what he used as his workforce, the oxen that he used to plow, he killed them, made them as a sacrifice, distributed, and that was it. Are you prepared? Are you ready? Can you identify the call of God upon your life? The Lord will give us the wisdom and that which is necessary. Let's take a third example. Paul the Apostle in Acts chapter 9, verses 3 and 4. Paul had an intent of what he had wanted to do. He had got the letters from Rome. He was going to persecute the Christians. Then all of a sudden he saw a flashing light. He heard a voice that says, Paul, Paul, why persecutest thou me? And instantly he knew that this was not the ordinary. He said, Lord, who are you? He said, it's I, Jesus Christ, that thou persecutest. It is hard to kick against the pricks. The rest was history. So as we speak to ourselves today, let us be prepared. Let us be ready. Because the truth is, when God calls you, that means he wants to bless you abundantly. That means he wants to use you or me as his weapon of war. As he calls, be in tune with his frequency. Answer the call and say, "O Lord, here I am, send me." God bless you.